Sakurai was a pathetic loner wasting his life away until his juniors started teasing him for fun while hanging out with him. However, before any of this, Sakurai had spent his first year of college in isolation, hiding away with video games. He avoided socializing since he felt his appearance scared people, and it only made him lonelier. But things took a surprising turn when an energetic girl, who Sakurai recognized from high school as his junior Uzaki, bounced into his life with a big smile and endless energy. She was excited to see him on the first day of his second year and eagerly struck up a conversation as they walked across campus. When Uzaki asked if Sakurai was interested in joining the swimming club, he quickly pointed out that their college didn't even have one. Instead, he explained he wanted to broaden his horizons by trying new things. But even though he talked about these ambitions, Uzaki always caught him just hanging around campus looking lazy and bored. By the end of the year, she found him still stuck in his loner habits, so she decided to step in and try to drag him out of his comfort zone. One afternoon, Uzaki approached Sakurai, suggesting they hang out together. Coincidentally, one of Sakurai's classes got cancelled, so he had some free time. As he walked through campus, his usual gloomy look caused some nearby girls to avoid him nervously. Just then, Uzaki sprinted toward him, colliding right into him. He grumbled, blaming her for hitting him with her heavy bag, but she teased him, saying he should be grateful for her company. Despite Sakurai's protests and his attempts to brush her off, Uzaki continued tagging along. When he finally asked her why she was following him, she simply said she was free and wanted to hang out too. Sakurai claimed he'd rather keep to himself, but this only made Uzaki laugh, teasing that he was too shy to be around girls. Her endless chatter filled the air, and when she realized he was ignoring her, she suddenly yelled, accusing him of using her only when it suited him. Embarrassed, Sakurai told her to quiet down, but it was too late. Everyone around stared and whispered, causing him to reluctantly let her come along. They eventually reached a cinema, and Uzaki noticed he was planning to watch a movie by himself. She teased him about it, pointing out that his only companion seemed to be his worn-out backpack. Her constant playful jabs were getting on Sakurai's nerves, but he couldn't deny that her presence added a bit of fun. When it came time to pick a movie, he decided to let Uzaki choose, only for her to pick a film he'd already seen. After the movie, Uzaki mentioned she needed new earbuds, so they made a quick stop at an electronics store. Inside, Sakurai resisted the urge to buy anything unnecessary, but Uzaki led him to try out a massage chair. As they relaxed, she began happily commenting on how the massage relieved her shoulder pain, hinting that her chest was the cause. This made Sakurai uneasy, and he tried not to stare as she seemed overly pleased with the massage. Feeling uncomfortable, he quickly ushered her out, but she playfully slipped away, only to step onto another massage machine that made her shirt move, displaying the words "so big." Sakurai, now thoroughly flustered, tried to look away to keep his focus. Next, Uzaki dragged Sakurai over to a VR gaming section, where she eagerly put on a headset to play a zombie game. Her loud reactions drew attention, making Sakurai chuckle until she accidentally bumped into him in the game's excitement. When Sakurai gave the VR a try, the employee mischievously put him in a horror scenario, and he freaked out when a virtual shark appeared, grabbing onto Uzaki's shoulder, thinking it was a jellyfish. After removing the headset, he admitted how realistic the game was. They then moved to a batting cage, where Sakurai tried his best to hit a baseball but missed each one. Uzaki laughed, joking that even Sakurai's dad would disown him for his poor skills. She took a turn herself, promising to hit a home run, but she forgot to stretch and ended up pulling a muscle. She groaned on the ground, blaming Sakurai for her slip-up, though he'd done nothing wrong. Later, he treated Uzaki to dinner to make up for her injury. She ate enthusiastically, and Sakurai joked that she looked like an improper fraction because of her short height and big appetite. She laughed it off, claiming her rice cakes would grow even more with time. However, she ended up eating Sakurai's portion of food, which annoyed him until the chef mistook them for a couple and offered them extra food. Uzaki happily accepted and finished everything before Sakurai even got a taste. The next day, Uzaki showed up again to pester him, talking about how much more fun she'd had with him compared to her female friends. She suddenly groaned loudly, saying her back hurt from yesterday's activities, causing bystanders to give them strange looks. Even a scruffy cat stared at them. One day at the coffee shop where Sakurai worked, his boss asked him to serve a customer who was about to leave. Just as his boss began to praise his professionalism and calm demeanor, Sakurai suddenly yelled out, completely shocking everyone. Turned out, Uzaki had somehow discovered where he worked and decided to pay him a surprise visit. Annoyed, Sakurai told her to leave before she ruined his peaceful workspace, but Uzaki ignored him and continued bouncing around, filling the cafe with her lively energy. Her antics even had the shop owner cowering in fear, hiding from what he saw as an unpredictable whirlwind. Uzaki spotted him and eagerly introduced herself, only for the owner to assume she was still in middle school. This sparked an immediate outburst from Uzaki, who was offended by the assumption, while Sakurai playfully teased her, comparing her height to that of a short comedian. The shop owner was taken aback by his mistake, especially since he usually judged ages accurately. But as soon as he stood up, he noticed Uzaki's assets, which instantly shifted his perception, making him realize she was no middle schooler. When Sakurai came to take her order, Uzaki demanded that he treat her like a VIP, but he bluntly refused, which led her to jokingly tell his boss to cut his pay. She kept chatting with the same endless energy, so Sakurai finally explained he was feeling awkward since he wasn't used to serving people he actually knew. Trying to one-up him, Uzaki asked if he treated all his classmates poorly, to which Sakurai replied that he only treated her special by acting coldly toward her. She almost mistook his words as sweet until she realized he was just being sarcastic, which made her snap back into her usual teasing mode. After reluctantly giving her VIP treatment, Uzaki made fun of his efforts, so he eventually tossed her out of the cafe. Amused by how well they got along, Sakurai's boss even sent him home early, saying he should endure more of Uzaki's teasing outside of work. The next morning, as Sakurai walked to school, he froze when he spotted a stray cat. Just then, Uzaki showed up and noticed that the cat wouldn't let Sakurai pet it, probably sensing his grumpy energy. Uzaki reached out her hand, and the cat warmed up to her instantly, which she proudly took as proof of her pure heart. She mentioned that her family had 2 cats, which made Sakurai daydream about meeting them. But his thoughts quickly wandered into awkward territory as his mind started racing. Suddenly, a passing bike scared the cat off, and Uzaki, determined to pet it again, dashed after the animal. Uzaki ended up getting tangled in a bush during her chase, so Sakurai rushed over to help her. However, as he reached her, he accidentally noticed her in an awkward position, prompting him to awkwardly mutter, "Cover that up." As he tried to look away, still stuck, Uzaki asked for his help, so Sakurai carefully tried to untangle her. In the process, they somehow ended up in a position that looked compromising just as some girls walked by, causing them to gasp in shock. Later that afternoon in the cafeteria, Uzaki appeared again, and Sakurai felt a bit flustered after the morning incident. Uzaki, however, seemed unbothered, and she quickly broke the ice by assuming Sakurai had wanted her company for lunch. Sakurai explained that he was actually meeting a friend, which surprised Uzaki, who was curious why he was always alone if he had friends. Though they ended up sitting in different spots, Uzaki kept making funny hand gestures at him. When he didn't understand, she started texting him, mostly to poke fun at him for his usual loner vibe. By the time she finished texting him, her noodles had gone cold. That evening, Sakurai returned to work, enjoying a peaceful shift. But soon enough, Uzaki came back, determined to disrupt his quiet time. She greeted him enthusiastically, grabbing his arm, which made Sakurai's mind race again. However, she just needed help with an essay and wasn't interested in anything romantic. When he refused to assist her, she pleaded with him until his boss gave him some time off to help her out, hoping to watch the two bicker. As they began working, his boss even brought them tea, eager to see their amusing dynamic. While Sakurai helped her with her essay, Uzaki asked if she could see his place someday. Surprised by the request, Sakurai hesitated, explaining that he was already dealing with enough pests and didn't need another one. Uzaki playfully offered to cook for him if she visited, even suggesting she could stay over to save money, which left Sakurai completely flustered. He felt certain that her cluelessness was pushing his patience, knowing that his self-control might not hold if she actually stayed over. From that day on, Uzaki continued to pop up in Sakurai's life, bringing both chaos and laughter wherever she went. Whether they were at work, on campus, or just grabbing a bite to eat, her relentless energy kept him on his toes. Though he often grumbled about her teasing, he couldn't deny that her presence added a new, unpredictable excitement to his everyday life. The next day at the coffee shop, Ami, the daughter of Sakurai's boss, couldn't help but admire Sakurai's hard-working attitude and his sharp collarbone, which she found surprisingly attractive. She was known for being a bit of a creep and had always found him interesting. As she observed him, she noticed that more female customers seemed to be drawn to him and even overheard him mention that he used to be on the swim team. This revelation had Ami wishing she had X-ray vision, as she could only imagine what he looked like back in his swimming days. Just as she was about to lose herself in these thoughts, Her dad interrupted, reminding her to focus on her job. A little while later, Uzaki showed up at the cafe, instantly drawing Ami's curiosity. Ami couldn't understand why this lively girl was so friendly with her dad, who also worked at the cafe. When Ami asked Sakurai who Uzaki was, he replied that she was a second-year college student, which surprised Ami as Uzaki didn't quite look the part. She watched as Uzaki and Sakurai enthusiastically discussed a game they both loved, which made Ami wonder if there was something romantic between them. Curious, Ami approached her father and asked if he thought they were dating, but he just told her to serve Uzaki instead. Ami brought Uzaki a glass of water and introduced herself. Uzaki responded politely with her signature cheerful smile and large, bright eyes. Ami initially thought she was cute, but as she looked closer, she couldn't help but notice Uzaki's larger-than-life assets resting on the table. Uzaki then went on about her mission to help Sakurai live a happier life, which only fueled Ami's curiosity further. She found herself amused by how the two friends bickered back and forth. At one point, Sakurai tried to refill Uzaki's water, but she accidentally bumped into him, spilling the cold water all over herself. Annoyed, she loudly complained about how cold it was as she jokingly blamed Sakurai for the spill. The next day, Uzaki came to the cafe again, only to find out from Ami that Sakurai had caught a cold. Surprised, Uzaki wondered how someone as hot as him could be so weak. Meanwhile, at Sakurai's place, he was struggling with his cold, barely able to keep himself together. When he heard a knock at the door, he opened it to find Uzaki waiting outside, as cheerful as ever. He wanted to tell her off, but before he could, he felt dizzy and nearly collapsed, so Uzaki helped him to his bed. She offered to make him lunch, and though Sakurai was hesitant, he eventually agreed. However, his kitchen was nearly empty, forcing Uzaki to go shopping. She returned with groceries and whipped up a delicious meal. When she tried to feed him, Sakurai refused, opting to eat on his own. Uzaki, wanting to make him feel better, then held up a washcloth and told him he needed to clean up since he looked and smelled unwell. Sakurai reluctantly let her help as she wiped his face and arms, teasing him the entire time. Next, she gave him some medicine and insisted on staying to keep him company. Sakurai was too exhausted to argue, and before he fell asleep, he mumbled a thank you to Uzaki for helping him out. Hours later, Uzaki suddenly woke him up, pestering him to help her with a level in her video game. Frustrated, Sakurai told her to take the console home with her if it meant he could rest. A week later, Sakurai decided to host a small barbecue for his friends. While Uzaki focused on picking out food, Ami and her dad watched the two, entertained by their antics. At one point, Ami's dad casually asked Sakurai about the night Uzaki stayed over to help him while he was sick. Sakurai quickly clarified that there was nothing romantic between them. He only liked being by himself and didn't want Uzaki's reputation to suffer from people thinking she was staying over at his place. Ami and her dad exchanged a knowing look, both agreeing that they should find a way to get these two to confess their feelings. The next day at school, Uzaki showed up with a coin and tried to hypnotize Sakurai, a plan that didn't work at all. Still, Sakurai decided to play along, pretending to feel sleepy. Uzaki then asked him to call her by her first name, which caught him off guard and embarrassed him. After fumbling with a few random names, he finally managed to say her name, making her so happy that she asked him to repeat it multiple times, attracting the attention of onlookers who couldn't understand their strange interaction. Since Uzaki thought her hypnosis was working, she took the chance to list things she wanted Sakurai to buy her, including a new VR headset. This irritated Sakurai, and he jokingly smacked her to show that he was pretending the entire time. She scolded him for being too friendly with Ami, even though they'd known each other for a while, which led Sakurai to apologize for the misunderstanding. However, he begged Uzaki to stop using his first name so freely, and she agreed. When he absent-mindedly began waving the coin, Uzaki suddenly froze, looking dazed, as if she had actually been hypnotized. Sakurai panicked, realizing that he might have accidentally put her in a vegetable state. A few days before the start of Golden Week, a long public holiday in Japan, Sakurai's boss told him the cafe would be closed, giving him a rare opportunity to take some time off. With no plans, he decided to relax and dive into his favorite video games, spending 2 full days gaming non-stop. Just as he was about to defeat a difficult boss, his doorbell suddenly rang. He instantly knew it had to be Uzaki, coming over to disrupt his peaceful time alone. When he opened the door, Uzaki greeted him with her usual energy and suggested they play a different game that had a new event she was excited about. Although Sakurai admitted he had the game, he embarrassingly revealed he had never played it since he was usually alone and had no one to play with. Uzaki laughed at his confession and couldn't resist poking fun at him, teasing him for being such a loner. Outside, she managed to capture a creepy-looking cat in the game and proudly showed it to Sakurai, who looked irritated. Sensing his annoyance, she took a step back to stay out of his way, just in case. She then checked what kind of creatures he had managed to catch and noticed they were all gorillas. Sakurai grumbled that he was having a hard time seeing the screen clearly, which prompted Uzaki to suggest he get a pair of glasses. When they arrived at the glasses shop, they ran into Ami, who was curious about what they were up to. Uzaki playfully asked Ami to help Sakurai find the perfect glasses. Although Ami was ready to recommend a frame, Uzaki grabbed a random pair and made Sakurai try them on. Surprisingly, he looked great with the glasses, which only encouraged them to make him try on more styles. One by one, Sakurai tried on every frame in the shop, reluctantly turning into their glasses model while Uzaki and Ami laughed at how he looked in each pair. Just as he was about to reach his limit, Ami handed him her favorite frames and instructed him to pose in a silly way, further embarrassing him. After what felt like an eternity of being Uzaki and Ami's dress-up doll, Sakurai got fed up and refused to try on any more glasses. They left the store without buying anything, and on the way home, Uzaki proudly showed him the cat she had caught in the game. Meanwhile, Sakurai was only able to capture another gorilla, much to his frustration. As they continued their journey home on the train, Uzaki caught a few more creatures, but Sakurai still ended up with gorillas. The train gradually filled with people, and Uzaki commented that there must be a big soccer game happening nearby, which explained the crowd. At one point, a large man accidentally bumped into Sakurai, who quickly positioned himself between the stranger and Uzaki to shield her from the crowd. However, in doing so, he accidentally ended up a little too close to Uzaki, which made both of them feel embarrassed. He tried to distract himself from the awkwardness by focusing on something else, but couldn't help but notice an attractive model on a nearby advertisement, which only made him more nervous. Desperate to calm down, Sakurai closed his eyes and mentally repeated calm thoughts, like blue skies and peaceful mountains. When Uzaki tried to talk to him, he was so deep in concentration that he barely noticed her. Eventually, they arrived at their station, and as Uzaki turned to talk to Sakurai, she noticed he had somehow fallen asleep standing up, completely exhausted. He missed the stop and had to take the next train back. The following day, Sakurai shared the embarrassing story with his boss, Asai, who held back laughter as he tried to figure out how Sakurai had managed to shut down his own mind just to avoid embarrassment. Asai suggested Sakurai should try being more relaxed, like his daughter Ami, who often spent time with her friends. But Ami chimed in to say that no boys ever approached her, which left her father disappointed. Later that day, Sakurai saw Uzaki lying on a bench at school, looking gloomy. She was upset because there were no holidays that month and she was itching for some fun. Feeling a bit sorry for her, Sakurai surprised her by suggesting they go out the next weekend. Uzaki was so shocked that Sakurai, known for his love of solitude, actually wanted to make plans with her. When he asked her where she wanted to go, she suggested a train trip, which made him briefly recall their last train ride and blush from embarrassment. Not wanting her to get too excited, he let it slip that it was actually Ami's idea for him to ask her out. Uzaki seemed annoyed, but Sakurai couldn't understand why. When the day of their outing finally arrived, it started raining, and Sakurai assumed Uzaki would cancel. To his surprise, she showed up at his doorstep, completely soaked from the rain and looking a bit like a drenched puppy. She mentioned she had gone shopping and needed a place to dry off, asking if she could use his shower. Flustered, Sakurai reluctantly agreed but quickly declined her playful invitation to join her. After freshening up, Uzaki borrowed one of his t-shirts and began preparing a meal in his kitchen. Feeling a bit bad about her doing all the work, Sakurai decided to help her. Once they finished cooking, Uzaki suggested they play some games. Sakurai agreed, admitting it wouldn't hurt to be lazy for once. Uzaki, however, joked that he was already a master at being lazy. They played for hours, laughing and enjoying each other's company. By the end of the night, Sakurai realized he'd actually had a lot of fun and told her she was welcome to come over again. At the station, Uzaki eagerly asked if she could return the next day to help him clear a difficult dungeon in one of the games. Sakurai agreed, but just as Uzaki was about to board her train, she realized she had forgotten her train pass back at Sakurai's place. Laughing at her forgetfulness, the two of them walked back together, extending their evening a bit longer and enjoying each other's company along the way. One summer day, Uzaki found Sakurai and hurried over to meet him, full of energy as usual. Sakurai wasn't really in the mood for her excitement, but she ignored his disinterest and asked if she could come over later. She didn't want him advancing in their favorite game, Tower, without her. He assured her he wouldn't play it and wouldn't touch the spooky creature she seemed to be obsessed with. Later that day, Sakurai had a strange dream. He was rescuing a cat stuck on the edge of a tall building. Just as he was reaching out to save it, the cat leaped over him, causing him to slip and fall from the building. Suddenly, he woke up, heart racing, and realized it was just a nightmare. Thinking no one noticed, he relaxed a bit, but then he saw Uzaki nearby, smirking, clearly waiting for the perfect moment to tease him. She moved closer and guessed he'd dreamt about falling from a high place, laughing while she teased him. Sakurai quickly told her to keep quiet since the lecturer had already started class. Coincidentally, the lecture was about phobias, particularly the fear of heights, illustrated with cats in a way that looked exactly like his nightmare. Uzaki took this as a chance to tease him even more, and after class, she continued joking about his fall. Sakurai tried to brush it off, saying it was just superstition to believe dreams had deep meanings. But Uzaki, bouncing around as usual, insisted she thought dreams were worth paying attention to. Mid-skip, she tripped on the stairs, but Sakurai managed to catch her before she could fall. As he held her, he explained that people who trip could develop a fear of stairs, known as the stair yips. The intensity of his explanation left her wide-eyed, almost spooked. Shortly afterward, Sakurai ran into a guy named Sakaki, who used him as an excuse to escape a group of girls who were pestering him. Apparently, Sakaki couldn't handle his alcohol, and the girls wanted to go out drinking all night. Grateful to Sakurai, Sakaki thanked him for unknowingly saving him, as he admitted he couldn't let the girls find out he was a lightweight. The girls wanted to follow Sakaki, but when they saw Sakurai's serious expression, they gave up and left. Chatting with Sakurai, Sakaki asked what he'd been up to. Sakurai didn't want to mention Uzaki's constant teasing, so he kept it vague, saying things were normal. Sakaki seemed to read between the lines and asked if Sakurai had a girlfriend. Sakurai ignored him, but Sakaki grabbed his shirt, wanting him to be honest. At that moment, Uzaki appeared, shocked to see Sakurai with a friend. She'd always thought Sakurai was such a loner that he would pay people to sit with him to avoid looking lonely. Sakaki found Uzaki's reaction amusing, and as Uzaki and Sakurai slipped back into their usual bickering, Sakaki was left wondering what kind of relationship they had. After Uzaki left for her class, Sakaki joked, thinking Sakurai might be in love with her, and even considered whether he should worry about her age. Later that day, Sakaki visited them while they were playing games, asking how far their relationship had developed. In a very blunt way, Sakurai rolled his eyes, calling Sakaki dumb and asking if he was born that way. Uzaki, overhearing their talk, joined in, insisting she and Sakurai were just friends and that he was the safest guy ever. Sakaki laughed, saying she practically insulted Sakurai without realizing it. Realizing he wouldn't get anywhere with them, Sakaki begins suggesting they'd make a good couple, which led Sakurai and Uzaki to ignore him completely and walk away, leaving Sakaki to talk to himself. After they left, Ami approached Sakaki, upset over his teasing, and warned him not to push Sakurai and Uzaki together too quickly. She wanted their relationship to unfold naturally, like a slow burn romance series rather than a quick, predictable story. Sakaki, amused by her enthusiasm, suggested teaming up, but Ami slammed her hand on the table, telling him to focus on himself and maybe get a haircut instead of meddling. Meanwhile, Uzaki bought a chocolate mint-flavored ice cream and offered some to Sakurai. Curious, he took a taste but immediately commented that it reminded him of toothpaste, which caused Uzaki to snap. To her, chocolate and mint were the perfect combo, and she was quick to defend her favorite flavor. She told him he must have dull taste buds if he couldn't appreciate it, even going so far as to suggest he might prefer eating toothpaste instead. Sakurai watched in surprise as she launched into an impassioned explanation of the history of chocolate mint, practically turning her defense into a speech. By the end, she was so dramatic that even nearby people started clapping, making her seem like she'd just given a grand performance. Sakurai apologized, but Uzaki called him a lower life form for not understanding the flavor's greatness. She was so worked up that she playfully raised her fist as if to punch him. Sakurai stopped her, smiling at her fierce dedication, and she then asked him to try the ice cream one more time. Embarrassed but unable to say no, he reluctantly took another bite. Uzaki's hopeful puppy eyes convinced him to give it a second chance, and this time he admitted it wasn't so bad. They only realized they'd been sharing the same stick when she took the last bite, causing both to blush. Days went by, and soon we reached the classic beach episode with Sakurai, Uzaki, Ami, and Sakaki, who were all unaware they'd been set up by Asai a few days earlier. Recently, Uzaki had taken up a part-time job at Asai's cafe, much to Sakurai's frustration. Uzaki claimed she wanted to earn some extra cash for the summer and also keep an eye on Sakurai's loser face, as she put it. Asai didn't think twice before hiring her since she brought fun and energy to the place. He asked Sakurai to train her, which led to Sakurai showing her the ins and outs of customer service, with Ami pretending to be a customer to help. When Uzaki questioned why Sakurai didn't add a few jokes while serving, he insisted that it wasn't his job to entertain. She pointed out how overly serious he was, which only made him grumble and scowl. Ami then admitted they'd already trained Uzaki. Their goal was simply to rile up Sakurai and watch him lose his temper. Later, Uzaki asked Sakurai what he planned for summer break. He said he wanted to spend it gaming indoors, but she suggested he try something different, even though he seemed thrilled at the thought of hours spent gaming. Her idea, a trip to the beach. This quickly got Sakaki's attention, and when he showed up, the group found themselves heading to the coast. At the beach, Uzaki unintentionally made Ami uncomfortable with her confidence and boldness. When they noticed Sakaki was missing, they figured he'd gone to check out their lodgings, as he'd volunteered at the cafe around that time and might have had something planned. Indeed, he was cooking up a scheme with Ami, hoping to bring Uzaki and Sakurai closer together. Back at the water, Sakurai was enjoying the waves, a hobby he had since childhood. When he returned, Ami teased him, saying he didn't need a swim cap or goggles unless he wanted to look like a lifeguard. Uzaki joked that he looked like a mama's boy, ditching him with a laugh. Ami scolded Sakurai gently, nudging him to stick with Uzaki to avoid random strangers hitting on her. When he awkwardly attempted small talk, he instead complimented Ami's swimsuit, earning himself a smack from her. Sakurai eventually joined Uzaki, though she managed to tackle him within seconds. Sakaki then arrived with a watermelon and a bat, setting up a fun game where they could all let loose. Sakurai was the first to be blindfolded, while Uzaki mischievously gave him confusing directions to throw him off. She even added complicated instructions, like a gamer with a hidden agenda, which led him to stumble and, somehow, grab what he thought was a jellyfish. In reality, he had grabbed Uzaki's talons, thinking he'd misidentified it, causing both Ami and Sakaki to watch in shock. Ami tried to help by saying he was holding the watermelon, but Uzaki quickly switched the real watermelon for herself, making Sakurai oblivious to what he'd done. Once they arrived at the summer house, owned by Sakaki's family, Uzaki and Sakurai were amazed at every little detail of the place, clearly impressed by the smallest things. They spent time outside grilling barbecue, and Uzaki proposed they play some games. Sakaki suggested a test of courage in the mountains instead, prompting everyone to take flashlights and head into the forests. When Sakaki explained the purpose, Sakurai wanted to go home, not being a fan of scary things, but Sakaki warned him that sharing his fears wasn't smart. Uzaki, seeing an opportunity, flashed a mischievous grin that sent shivers down his spine. She grabbed Sakurai's phone and ran, threatening to expose his secrets unless he caught her, making him dash after her without realizing what was happening. Sakaki commented that this wasn't exactly his plan, expecting Sakurai to be braver, but it seemed he was more of a scaredy cat than they'd thought. While searching for the two, Ami asked Sakaki why he'd gone to such lengths to organize everything, to which he explained that Sakurai was a decent guy, but his isolated life in college was too lonely. When they finally found Sakurai and Uzaki, he was so terrified he couldn't move. Back at the summer house, he went straight to bed, leaving Uzaki to play alone. As she was about to leave, he instinctively grabbed her hand in his sleep, making her question if he was faking it. Feeling a bit guilty for scaring him earlier, she decided to stay with him for the night, much to the surprise of a nearby cat who watched with wide eyes. The next morning, as they freshened up, Sakurai mentioned he'd had a wonderful night, prompting Uzaki to suggest he invest in some body pillows if he liked being close to someone. Meanwhile, Sakaki and Ami, peeking from the door, realized they'd missed out on an unforgettable moment. One evening, as Uzaki was checking her schedule, her phone rang with an unexpected call from Sakurai. He asked her to come meet him, saying he really needed her. His words echoed in her mind all night and into the next day. When they met, he looked a bit embarrassed, and she asked what he meant by needing her. With a slightly sheepish expression, he pointed to a poster for a cat cafe, explaining he wanted her as an excuse to go in so people wouldn't think he had some unusual cat obsession. Uzaki was both annoyed and amused by this, giving him an exasperated look and kicking his leg. Inside the cafe, they were asked to remove their shoes, and then they were free to interact with the kittens. Sakurai, excited but unsure, asked the staff if he could pet the cats. Getting the okay, he gently stroked them as Uzaki had once shown him, feeling surprisingly happy. His delighted reactions made Uzaki call him out, saying he looked way happier petting cats than he ever did with people. He laughed it off but thanked her sincerely for coming with him, admitting he wanted to return the favor somehow. Uzaki then hinted that her 20th birthday was coming up, and she wanted to make it memorable. Sakurai, a bit embarrassed, apologized, admitting his leg was still so numb from her earlier kick that he hadn't processed what she said. Uzaki, annoyed, took the cats away from him, watching as his face fell with disappointment. As payback, she tickled his numb leg, enjoying his helpless reaction until the cafe staff asked them to leave for disturbing the peace. As they walked out, Sakurai blamed her for getting them kicked out, just when he had finally learned to bond with cats. Uzaki, unimpressed, mentioned she had cats at home and invited him to visit them instead, though he quickly refused. Then he asked what she wanted for her birthday, but Uzaki shrugged, doubting he'd come up with anything special. Later, Sakurai turned to Ami and her father, Asai, for some advice on what he could do for Uzaki's birthday. Eager to help, they asked him for ideas. He suggested maybe flowers, since her name meant flower, or even a ring, though he worried she might misinterpret either gift. Ami encouraged him, saying Uzaki would likely enjoy any gesture, but that a big, meaningful gift might make her overthink things. So, they suggested he go with his instincts and keep things simple. On her birthday, Sakurai received a call from Uzaki, who repeated his own words from before, saying she wanted him to be with her. He went to meet her, still uncertain, only to find out she'd planned it all along so he'd treat her to an expensive night out at a local pub. He realized he had totally overthought her intentions and laughed at himself. Inside the pub, he asked if she was sure about drinking on her birthday instead of wanting something like a new iPhone. Uzaki said she was perfectly fine celebrating by drinking together. Trying alcohol for the first time, she began with a small sip but quickly moved to beer, commenting it was bitter yet surprisingly good. It wasn't long before Uzaki was chugging down drink after drink, excited to try more and promising to drain Sakurai's wallet. She kept ordering food and drinks non-stop, and by the time they left the pub, she was completely intoxicated. On their way back, she started leaning on him, her actions a little too close for comfort, which made Sakurai blush. When they finally reached her place, Uzaki tried to play video games, but Sakurai, feeling drained, settled down on the sofa to rest. She continued drinking and acting more carefree, which made Sakurai decide to let her experience a hangover so she'd learn her lesson. Exhausted, he drifted off to sleep, only to be jolted awake by Uzaki leaning over as if to kiss him. All his senses went on high alert, but Uzaki laughed it off as a joke, teasing him for being flustered. She poked fun at him for being a kiss-less prude, which annoyed him, so they both agreed to call it a night. The next morning, Sakurai watched with a mix of satisfaction and humor as Uzaki struggled through her first hangover, swearing never to drink again. After she finally started to feel a bit better, she thanked Sakurai for treating her to a fun night out. But, just as he was about to leave, she accidentally threw up on his packed lunch, leaving him both disgusted and amused by how the night had ended. The next day, Uzaki created quite a scene on campus trying to apologize to Sakurai, even though he already assured her the argument was no big deal. Curious students nearby quickly got the wrong idea, thinking he was some unfaithful boyfriend. Uzaki then offered him some money her mom had given her, making things worse as the bystanders assumed he was a greedy boyfriend taking advantage of both Uzaki and her mom. The girls watching looked horrified, even whispering about calling the police. Every word Uzaki said only seemed to confirm their suspicions. When Sakurai mentioned it was just an innocent favor, and that it was her first time, the onlookers panicked even more, so he quickly took the money, asked Uzaki to stop talking, and tried to leave. Despite his efforts, his reputation was officially ruined. Later, at the cafe, Ami and her father, Asai, sat down with food in hand, eager to hear the story of Uzaki's birthday. Sakurai sighed deeply, already knowing they'd assumed the worst. As he explained their night out, including their trip to the pub and her visit to his place afterward, they leaned in even closer. When he started recalling some of the awkward moments, he looked genuinely pained, which led Ami and Asai to imagine a soap opera-level disaster. Meanwhile, Sakaki, who was away on a trip, felt a sudden sense that something entertaining was happening back home. Seeing that Sakurai seemed worn out from dealing with Uzaki, Ami and Asai decided to give him a free ticket to a local festival, with the condition that he take Uzaki along. Sakurai tried to decline, but Ami, full of emotion, dramatically told him to get out of the cafe and take Uzaki. Reluctantly, he agreed. That evening, Sakurai met up with Uzaki at the festival. She seemed quieter and more reserved than usual, which was strange since she usually had such a chatty, upbeat energy. Sakurai encouraged her to enjoy the festival, although the experience felt awkward and slightly forced. Uzaki remained unusually quiet and even looked a bit down. Remembering Ami's advice, he began complimenting Uzaki's festival attire, which made her smile a bit. Gaining confidence, he continued with more compliments, finally breaking through her serious mood. Soon, Uzaki was back to her playful self, teasing him by saying it was probably his only chance to spend time with a cute girl in traditional attire. Embarrassed, Sakurai tried to laugh it off, but some people nearby noticed and joked that he seemed like a desperate guy trying to impress her. As they continued wandering through the festival, Sakurai suddenly had a flashback to their high school days when Uzaki was determined to learn how to swim and secretly practiced her strokes. Remembering this, he decided to support her and give her some tips back then. In the present, they stayed at the festival late, walking around and enjoying the atmosphere. Sakurai even surprised her by grabbing some grilled corn, which he handed her as a small treat. They eventually found a quiet spot to watch the fireworks together, enjoying the peaceful moment. Suddenly, Sakurai snapped back to reality and realized he had been staring at Uzaki, who noticed and teasingly told him to relax, saying he still looked half asleep. Uzaki apologized again, even though Sakurai had already told her it wasn't necessary. He admitted that when she first started hanging out with him, he found her annoying and felt like she was a stubborn pest he couldn't get rid of. But as time passed, he realized she had actually made his life more fun and memorable. Uzaki brightened up, just as the fireworks began to light up the night sky, creating a perfect ending to their festival outing. Even though Sakurai struggled to fully enjoy the view with Uzaki standing so close, he felt grateful for her presence in his life. One day, Sakurai and Uzaki are running to meet Uzaki's mother because Sakurai wants to return the money she lent them. Even though Uzaki insists they don't need to worry about the money, she thinks it's a chance for Sakurai to change his cheap habits. She notices that Sakurai is quiet and teases him for being nervous about visiting her home, but he claims he has a stomachache. Uzaki reassures him, saying her mom is very nice and that he can even pet their cat, which makes him feel a little better. When they arrive, they are greeted by Uzaki's mom, Suki, who is 43 years old and looks very attractive. However, Sakurai's strong presence makes her feel a bit intimidated at first. But as she gets to know him, she starts to admire him, especially when he introduces himself and gives off a confident vibe. Sakurai quickly notices the cats in the house and rushes over to play with them. Suki, on the other hand, sits away from him because she feels a bit overwhelmed by his energy. As Sakurai explains the history behind the feud they had, Uzaki's mom pulls Uzaki aside to scold her for spending the night at a loser's house. Uzaki apologizes for her behavior, admitting she can be a bit airheaded. However, this makes Uzaki angry, and they start to bicker, which surprisingly makes Suki feel relieved, knowing her daughter is in good hands. At one point, Sakurai seems completely captivated by Tsuki's charm, making her worry that he might be interested in both her and Uzaki. Uzaki then suggests that it might be time for Sakurai to pet the cat, but she worries that he might feel shy, so she encourages him to visit a few more times before making his move. Suki misinterprets this and thinks they are talking about her, almost causing her to shout in surprise. Suddenly, Sakurai asks for permission to leave, and he takes Uzaki with him, leaving Tsuki with her cats, who seem to notice that she is smitten. The next day, Suki goes to a cafe where Uzaki works. She pretends to be there to see her daughter, but in reality, she wants to check on Sakurai. The cafe manager tells her not to worry because Uzaki has a great personality that customers love, as she acts silly and keeps everyone entertained. Suki feels flattered by this praise, but when the manager mentions that Sakurai is also popular with the lonely parents, she gets curious about him. She asks about Sakurai, specifically if he likes older women, which makes everyone else in the cafe laugh nervously. They believe she is mistaken because Sakurai is known for being oblivious, but they secretly worry about what might happen. As she is about to leave, she overhears Sakurai talking about his fondness for mature cocoa beans. Since he doesn't specify, Suki jumps to the conclusion that he's referring to women and thinks he is expressing interest in her. Later that day, Uzaki is competitive and wants to beat Sakurai at a game. She stays up all night practicing, just to see him get frustrated like a little kid. Afterward, she pressures him to buy her something from the convenience store, which makes him compare her to Tsuki, who is calm and collected. Uzaki does not take this comparison well and goes home, feeling jealous and angry. That evening, Uzaki becomes obsessed with her mom, who is watching a romantic drama that she thinks is similar to her situation with Sakurai. The next day at the cafe, Uzaki acts very formal with customers, which confuses them. Even Ami, a coworker, notices something is off and playfully splashes Sakurai with ice water to snap him out of his thoughts. While everyone discusses how to bring back Uzaki's fun personality, she walks in and scolds them for being silly. She even calls Sakurai a naive boy, which he finds annoying. Sakurai begs her to stop acting like her mom, but she insists it's his fault. Every word she says feels like it's burning into his mind, and he struggles to keep his cool. Despite this, Ami sees a business opportunity in Uzaki's current behavior, and suggests that she could appeal to a different group of customers. Uzaki agrees to change her attitude but wants something in return, making Sakurai hesitant. However, he eventually apologizes, which annoys Uzaki even more, leading to another playful argument. Just then, a customer's child interrupts them, asking them to stop fighting. To help, he gives them a lottery ticket, thinking it might make them happy. The couple heads to the lottery stand together, where they end up winning a trip for 2 nights, all expenses paid. This unexpected surprise takes both Uzaki and Sakurai by surprise, and they start to feel excited about what this could mean for their relationship. The next day, they arrive at the airport, and the first thing they notice is a well-dressed man shouting that a sandbox is better than Starbucks. Sakurai looks at the list of activities for their trip and seems more interested in the solo activities. Uzaki is ready to tease him about being lonely, but he is ready for her. Suddenly, a car drives in their direction, and to their surprise, it's Sakaki, who offers them a ride and shares a funny story about how they accidentally ran into each other. Uzaki thanks Sakaki for being so thoughtful, but she jokingly says that his personality seems a little suspicious. Sakaki takes this as a compliment and smiles. Their first stop is a sand dune, which is a breathtaking sight. The tour guide tells them that the dune measures about 2.4 kilometers. When they reach the top and see the ocean, Uzaki challenges Sakurai to a race. If he loses, he must buy her the popular caramel nut ice cream, but if he wins, she'll get him a sand-flavored ice cream. As soon as the race begins, Sakurai takes off, but he struggles to get a grip in the sand. Uzaki, on the other hand, glides past him on a sandboard, creating a significant lead. When the slope ends, she has to run the rest of the way, and just when it seems like Sakurai can't catch up, he suddenly finds the strength to win, or maybe Uzaki's heavy gear slows her down. They enjoy the beautiful view when a couple asks Sakurai to take their picture. He happily agrees, but the couple poses in a silly heart shape, which is embarrassing even for Sakurai. When it's time to head back, Sakurai has to pull Uzaki up the dune because she's too tired to walk. Their next stop is Japan's oldest primary school, which has been turned into a museum. Inside, they see figurines and various items related to manga, which the tour guide explains are popular in the town. After the museum, they visit a shrine where they pray and receive fortunes. Sakurai's fortune is surprisingly specific, while Uzaki's is more general. The two clueless friends are so focused on competing with each other that they don't realize the fortunes are hinting at their feelings for one another. When they finally read their fortunes, they notice that every fortune is about couples, except for theirs. Checking his phone, Sakurai sees that Ami and Sakaki have arrived and reveal that the entire tour is meant to spark love stories. Sakaki points out that everyone has been looking at them like they are a couple, and he suggests that they should make it official. As they head to the next location, they notice love symbols everywhere, and the things the couples say start to become obvious. This makes Uzaki feel nervous. While they are taking a ride, the mood becomes tense, and Sakurai begins to remember some past romantic moments. He tries to lighten the atmosphere by telling Uzaki to treat the trip as just fun, and she agrees. However, their next destination is filled with lovey-dovey couples, making it hard for them to relax. They then arrive at a hot spring where they are supposed to share a room, but both refuse to do so. Sakaki pushes Sakurai against the wall and tells him he needs to make a move on Uzaki. Just then, she walks into the room and catches them in an awkward position, leading her to take a photo of them. Later, they go to a mist room to unwind. It's so hot that Uzaki starts to sweat and feel dizzy. She asks Sakurai if she can borrow his towel since hers is soaked. Suddenly, she trips and falls into him, causing them to stick together on the slippery ground. As she tries to get up, she makes funny noises, which leads the guide to mistakenly think they are in a more intimate situation. She bursts in, playfully telling them to get a room. The next day, they finished their tour on a street filled with 117 bronze statues of various yokai, which are mythical creatures. The statues are so bizarre that just staring at them for too long makes them imagine what the yokai would look like in real life. It's an amusing and strange end to their adventure. Back in town, Uzaki called Sakurai to see if she could come over, as she usually does. He agreed, but he noticed that she always left her things at his place. To him, it seemed normal, but really, she was slowly moving in. When he opened the door to let her in, he was surprised to see her with a giant frog-shaped beanbag. Sakurai couldn't help but think of it as a punching bag. As they settled in, he asked her what she thought of his room. Uzaki joked that she always knew it was haunted, which made Sakurai a bit annoyed. He pointed out the mess of her things scattered everywhere and asked her why she brought the beanbag this time. She explained that her backside hurt from playing video games all day. Although he decided to let the frog stay, he grabbed a garbage bag and asked her to tidy up the stuff she didn't need. But when she started tossing everything into the bag, he yelled at her to stop treating his home like a dump. The only thing left was a creepy lizard head costume, which she wore and blew on, but Sakurai tossed it in the trash because it looked traumatizing. When Uzaki opened the fridge to grab a drink, Sakurai noticed a bag that didn't belong to him. He was about to scold her for invading his fridge when she told him it was actually their dinner, which she planned to cook. Feeling guilty for jumping to conclusions, he quickly apologized, and Uzaki enjoyed his apology like it was a side dish while they both ate at a cafe the next day. Sai, their friend, decided it was time to teach Sakurai how to cook. But Uzaki quickly interrupted, claiming he was hopeless in the kitchen. This only motivated Sakurai to prove her wrong. Unfortunately, his first cooking attempt was a disaster, a roasted spaghetti that was so bad it made Uzaki laugh uncontrollably, as if she were being paid to do so. He had to cover her mouth to stop her from laughing so hard. Later that day, Sakurai went over to Uzaki's house to help with some dough, as Tsuki had volunteered to give him a crash course in cooking. He thanked her for inviting him, which made Uzaki feel excited. While he was kneading the dough, Tsuki, Uzaki's mom, noticed that Uzaki seemed comfortable around Sakurai. This was because Sakurai was focused on the dough and not on her. While the dough rested, Sakurai spotted two black cats, and at the same time, Tsuki was walking by, thinking about how Sakurai would make a great husband. When she reached the door, she overheard them talking and picked out words that made her think Uzaki was trying to set her up with Sakurai. This made her head spin with emotions, but she took a deep breath and joined them for lunch as if nothing was wrong. Later, Sakurai decided to take Uzaki to a rock climbing arena as a thank you for helping him learn how to cook. While he climbed easily, Uzaki struggled, as her chest made it hard for her to move. She quickly got tired, while Sakurai looked like he could keep going for hours. This made Uzaki frustrated because it was the first time Sakurai was better than her at something. Seeing their competitive spirit, the trainer raised the difficulty to a higher wall, so Sakurai happily went to try it out. When he returned, he told Uzaki she could rest a bit longer, but she insisted on trying, only to get stuck halfway up. She looked like a crab, and they had to lower her down like a curtain. When Sakurai asked if she wanted to go home, she said she would just watch him, saying he looked like he was having fun. One day, Sakurai was about to sing karaoke secretly when Uzaki caught him. She wasted no time in making fun of him, which made him feel down. Seeing how sad he was, the girls left for the restroom but returned shortly after wearing Chinese-themed costumes. They tried to give him some fan service as an apology for teasing him, but he was more confused than pleased. Then they switched to bunny girl and attendant outfits, taking turns to tease him more. As a cultured man, Sakurai recognized that they were high, so he begged them to stop torturing him. When they finally sat down, he accidentally said he loved the bunny girl outfit, which led them to label him as a lower form of scum. A few days later, he opened the door to find a soaking wet Uzaki standing outside. When he invited her in, she surprisingly told him she couldn't hang out anymore and started crying in the rain. This caught him off guard and made him wonder what had gone wrong. Uzaki said she didn't want to bother Sakurai anymore, but she looked like she might melt any moment. He encouraged her to come inside, which made her smile mischievously. Then she admitted she completely forgot about her summer homework. She started complaining that students like her should get special treatment in school. Her ranting annoyed him so much that he locked the door on her. The next day, while at the cafe, the old man was chatting about how adorable Uzaki was. Sakurai, however, knew she was like a wild kitten, hiding her claws. He wanted to help the old man lift a box, but the man refused, claiming he was fine, only for his back to give out on him. This forced him to close the cafe and go to a chiropractor. Sakurai kindly volunteered to drive him there while the girls stayed behind to tidy up for the day. Once the guys left, Ami made herself a cup of coffee and asked Uzaki how her drink compared to her dad's coffee. Uzaki joked that she could taste her dad's perfume in it, which was oddly pleasant. She insisted that with skills like that, she shouldn't inherit the cafe, but Ami felt confident she could do it. However, she added that she needed to beat Sakurai at everything first. Meanwhile, at the chiropractor's office, the old man was having a blast while Sakurai watched back at the cafe. The girls wanted to talk about Sakurai since they had known him since high school, but Uzaki reminded them they only started hanging out at university. She remembered how her lowly friend made her join the swimming team as a manager, literally dragging her to the pool filled with excited boys. They were happy to finally have cute clubmates instead of the second-year dragons. While a girl was showing the team the ropes, Sakurai showed up. The boys wanted to greet him, but they were met with his intimidating glare, which made one girl rethink her life choices. However, over time, Uzaki learned not to judge a book by its cover. She saw that Sakurai was dedicated and enthusiastic about swimming, and from then on, she started cheering for him. Ami pointed out that it seemed like she had fallen for Sakurai, but Uzaki didn't realize her own feelings and got flustered, running away. Ami felt pleased that she had triggered such a reaction in Uzaki. The next day, Uzaki asked the group how Sakurai acted when he was drunk, but everyone looked at her like she was a stalker. Sakaki chimed in, saying that Sakurai never got drunk since he always knew his limits. With some convincing from Uzaki, she suggested they try to get Sakurai drunk for fun. Uzaki then told Sakaki to focus on making coffee instead of dressing up for the occasion. That night, Uzaki arrived at Sakurai's place ready for the drinking party, but she decided to cook a big meal first. He was genuinely impressed by her cooking, but she was more focused on getting him to drink. The next step in her plan was to watch a nice movie with him to distract him from the alcohol. Before long, he was already feeling the effects of the drinks. Uzaki remembered Sakaki saying that Sakurai couldn't lie when he was drunk. First, she had to make sure he was really wasted. As he started thanking her for the meal, he was speaking in half sentences, which made Uzaki pick out the word love. Thinking he was confessing his feelings, she quickly gulped down various drinks without realizing he was just complimenting her cooking. By the time Sakaki arrived, he found Sakurai passed out on the floor. He woke him up and told him to go to sleep in the futon. He also made Uzaki lie down, then turned off the lights and locked the door. The next morning, Sakurai and Uzaki woke up staring at each other awkwardly in the same futon. To solve the mystery of what happened the night before, Asai and Ami decided to play detective. They tried to remember everything, but Uzaki made it sound like Sakurai had intentionally slept next to her. The cafe crew locked up to ensure they didn't miss any details, and while they wondered if anything happened, Sakurai denied it. They didn't buy his obvious lie. Ami joked that he must be impotent for them to believe his story. He turned to Uzaki, who was slowly starting to remember the night. Sakurai pleaded with her to take the situation seriously. The tension between them was palpable, and they wished they could have seen what actually happened. Haki almost suggested they go on a 2-day drinking marathon, but Sakurai ruined that idea by reminding everyone that classes were starting the next day. The dread of returning to school made Haki so scared that she fainted in her chair. The next day, she woke up looking terrible at breakfast, which her brother noticed. However, once she arrived on campus, her mood improved when she spotted Sakurai walking in front of her. She begged him to hang out, but he told her there was no rush since they would always be together. This made both her and the cat blush. Seeing their reactions, Sakurai tried to clarify his words, but Uzaki cleverly flipped the situation, making it seem like he was the one begging to hang out with her. That's it for today, my fellow men of culture. Like and subscribe the channel for more plot-filled recaps.